Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. We are here. We have Kevin Allen here, and Russ will bring us some pre-show stuff. Eck will be joining us any second, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. So go ahead, Russ.
So Major League Baseball this year, during the pause, was meeting with the Players Association to kind of change up their draft. I don't remember exactly, but I think they wanted to go to like 5 rounds instead of like 30. And because they're going to have fewer teams, so it does make sense that at some point the draft does get cut down, because next year there's like 42 teams that are going to get lopped off for minor league ballparks. One of them in Binghamton, which is a beautiful park, and I did a signing there. It's a shame. I mean, the Yankees would play the Mets there every year. It was a good rivalry. We'd bring in a fair amount of fans, but you know, we've talked about that part. But now it's gotten to the point where, and it was reported late last night, like I mean late, like I want to say midnight.
Yeah.
So clearly they didn't want anybody to see it right away, and now they're not meeting about it. They've basically broken off MLB and the MLBPA, and I just don't get them. I don't understand. It seems like the greed factor now has become massive now that they're not playing. It seemed like everything was fine and everything was in check when things were going right. But then once the owners started with, well, we don't want to pay you for, you know, a full season if you're only playing 100 games. And so now every little detail is being fought.
Well,
yeah.
Russ, I mean, it was Ken Rosenthal and another reporter that reported for The Athletic, and the thing that caught my eye is that Major League Baseball and the Players Association came to some sort of agreement. This was the same day that they made the agreement about the time elapsing for contracts.
Right.
That they came to an agreement of, I think it was a 5 or 10 round Major League Baseball draft. And the Players Association wanted to stretch it out, I think, to like the normal 40 or something like that. And Major League Baseball didn't want to do it. And it's sort of like what's going on with, the salary situation in baseball, where they're like, okay, we'll take a prorated amount of the full season, depending on how many games we're going to play. But then the owners are pushing back on, well, okay, we're not going to have fans. So now we need a prorated amount of what it would cost without fans. And I get the feeling that what's not going to cause the cancellation of the 2020 baseball season will be the pandemic. It'll be the greed of either side and not being able to come to an agreement.
You know, and if you want a reason to have a salary cap, this is it.
Oh,
you know, when the NHL players get together with the NHL, they're in it together.
Yes.
So, because it's a 50-50 split of the revenue, and everybody has to work together to maximize the revenue, as opposed to what's going on in baseball, where, you know, as Russ said, you know, greed becomes a factor in negotiations. So, I mean, it's not the salary cap is not a perfect system. It's sort of like what Churchill said about democracy. You know, it's a terrible form of government, but it's the best one we got. You know, and I think the salary cap is very similar. Like, you know, there's parts of it that it seem unfair to, if you're a major market and you work hard to create, you know, your revenue and so forth. And then, you know, you've got to share it. And it's not in the true capitalistic system that we live in. But you know, this works out. It works out for competitiveness and in the NHL, and it makes it viable for smaller markets to compete with bigger markets.
Yeah. So one last thing. So the top prep player in the country now has basically already signed on to play for Washington State because of the sad state of the minor leagues and Major League Baseball. And you know, there's going to be a whole bunch of kids that aren't going to be able to go to college, that are going to just be held in limbo. So I really hope they do something about this, because it's awful. That's it.
For sure. All right, let's get going. I just got off the phone with a lot of people, so I have some fun stuff to talk about.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday. It's May 1st. We reached May. We somehow got through April. That was one fun month, wasn't it? It's Friday, May 1st, 2020.
I'm Michael Lagello, and I'm jealous of Kevin Allen's blue skies and fairly warm temperatures.
Beautiful there.
I'm Russ Cohen. Yeah, we're starting to get the blue skies after all the rain.
Yeah, and I'm Kevin Allen reporting from the hometown of former Major League Baseball player Charlie Maxwell, who was actually, his nickname is based on where he grew up, and that's where my lake house is, and that's where I am right now. So if you know that about Charlie Maxwell, you'll know where I am.
There you go. I expect the throngs to arrive there any moment, Kevin.
Yes.
I'm Eklund. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday in the afternoons, usually around now, to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And today we have the constant, I should say, to fill you in on the constantly evolving hockey world of scenarios and speculation, because that's what we really are looking at right now. Continually, things are changing.
I think we can describe what's going on, to use a line from a lyric from Peter Gabriel from Genesis. It's the river of constant change.
Yeah, and I think the word you use that best describes it is speculation, because the people I talk to preface everything they say with, well, there's nothing even remotely finalized. like we're all talking about these things, and they're real live discussions that are going on, but it could look completely different when we get there.
But what's really interesting is, so Larry Brooks is doing some fine reporting now, and about this, but he's also obviously the things he's throwing out too are just speculation and parts and pieces of what's happening now, because that's all there is, and that's all he can report on. There's nothing else to be doing. So I mean, but I'm happy he is, and I'm happy that, and as expected, like I talked about yesterday, Kevin, I'm like, sometimes you have to know the sources, the reporter's sources to a degree, and where LeBron is very tight with the league. Brooks has always been very tight with the players. That's always how it's been, and
he's got some other sources too.
But I'm just saying that, I know that, that the players trust Larry Brooks in a lot of ways.
Sure. But
over the years.
Good. This one I think is organization based.
Yes.
And I think this one is floated because James Dolan would like to recoup some of the advertising for his own building and be able to play games at Madison Square Garden. I believe that's probably what he wants.
Yeah, let's stop where we're at right now. I can first tell everybody what you're talking about.
Okay, so let me see. What's happening now is the players, what Larry Brooks' article, first of all, and then I'll talk about the people. I talked to 4 people today. Am I frozen?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
All right, I'm frozen on my side of things. I don't know why.
You're fine.
You're good.
All right, we're all frozen, but that's fine. Okay, so players so I talked to 4 people. Brooks' article today comes out that the players are not really thrilled with the concept of being sequestered into hotels, for 3 months, up to 3 months at a time, up to 3 months, if they were to go along in the playoffs or what have you, and they're not, and being away from their families for that period of time.
Which goes hand in hand with what Philip Deneau said. He was one of the first that came out earlier this week in a conference call with the for Canadians reporters, and that sort of just gained momentum.
Right, and so Larry comes out and says after that, he says, and this is not honestly unexpected from the player side of things, or even unreasonable from the player side of things. Like, I think that and the people I talk to, that's what I like about what's happening right now is I didn't get anybody who's saying, oh, that's unreasonable for the players to say that. Like, I talked to NHL people and team people, and they were like, yeah, we get it. We get why the players aren't happy with that. We're just looking at solutions. And that's a solution that we, putting them in the hotel seems to make some sense. So the concept that, is being floated out there now, and Brooks' article is entitled that the NHL is possibly pivoting on this, is to just have the games be played without fans in the buildings that they're probably originally going to be played in, and or the cities at least that they're originally going to be played in. Which totally opens up cans of worms, like crazy. Because without any control of that at all, we're in, and I got some good quotes I'll read you guys, but that I got today when talking about that. It just doesn't seem to make sense that you can do this, that you can actually travel around, and with the concept even being, and I think that this is what you're referring to, Russ, is that maybe at some point we can have some fans in, like that kind of thing.
Well, I don't even think it's fans. I just think if you own a building and it's empty right now, and you have no concerts, no games, and you're someplace like Madison Square Garden that's used to having Rangers, Knicks, concerts almost daily. Same thing with Wells Fargo. I think those owners' first choice would be to play even empty in their building because they at least would get regional advertising.
And they would get money from the NHL to do it, probably. The NHL would pay for the building. Somebody would be paying for something, right? So, Kevin, what are your thoughts on Brooks' article before I get into what I got?
Well, I mean, I think everything is possible. I mean, that's the one thing that everybody has said all the way through this is they want to, sit down and kind of hash it out. And I can add to it. I did a podcast and I had Steve Bartlett, an agent who represents a lot of players, both young players and old players. And what he said simply, and it was really an indication, is that there was, a lot of younger players who are willing can do almost anything because they don't have families, and a lot of older players who would prefer not to be away from their families. And so, we're going to have that level of division. But, the big question is whether or not you can do this without, sequestering. And, I don't know. I mean, that's going to, you're going to basically have the medical community will have to weigh in on that. You'll have to have the team physicians. They have a conference call and with CDC officials and kind of talk about what's the possibilities. That to me that's going to be difficult. Like I'll just give you an example. There's a friend of mine, actually my neighbor, whose son is quarantined now because he works at a Taco Bell where one of the people there tested positive.
Right.
Now, if you're living at home and doing this, trying to play hockey, and you go to a drugstore to pick something up and, end up meeting someone there who, just says hello, but, came too close to you. I mean, will you have to be quarantined when it comes out that person has, the virus. So when you're not in a biosphere, as I like to call it, or a safe zone, it's a little more difficult, a little more challenging, a little bit more, problematic. But if they're living a safe lifestyle and having their groceries delivered, and like most of us are, and don't go to the drugstore and aren't hanging out with anybody else, then this could work. But everyone has to agree to do it. And what's the odds of that? I guess is the question.
I mean, it increases the probability of being exposed, but on top of the one issue I have with it is the travel aspect. Because,
I think that's a big part of this.
It's like, I mean, not if you're talking about like I can't remember what one team, it was an East Coast team, like played Chicago in the last game of the regular season, so like out of conference. So okay, it's one thing if these teams are sequestered in 4 locations and they're all in the same place and they're all being tested. They may be tested in their individual places, but when you're talking about traveling and flying from one place to the other, we know that, mostly the only planes that are flying right now are ones that are shipping FedEx and Amazon things to other people. Not a lot of people are flying in these planes, and that just increases the potential of exposure. So
it's not with flying though, because they're all chartered.
Yeah,
like they can secure the flying aspect, but they're still gonna have to stay in hotels.
Sure, where they're another variable.
Yeah, that's a much bigger variable.
It is a much bigger variable because that when you're at home, actually, okay, you can control things a lot. The second you get out of your home, you can't, and that's just. And you don't know who's cleaning those rooms, and you don't know everything. Everything suddenly gets a little bit crazier.
Yeah.
So I was talking to people, and the first person I talked to was an owner, and this is what he said about this when I asked about the Brooks article and stuff like that, and what he says. His response is every scenario has to be played out, and if the players aren't okay with being with the sequestered aspect of this, then we'll play that scenario. Then we play that scenario out as well. Sure, it complicates things, but no more than what is already incredibly complicated. We owe it to them to play out that scenario, the scenario of playing in their regular states so they can live at home. But we have to also run that by the authorities, health experts, governors, mayors, etc.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that all that stuff is logical. The one thing that shouldn't be forgotten here, and I have to remind some of my regulars that I correspond with, and that is this isn't like CBA negotiation. No. Where it's contentious and everything else. Everybody wants to play.
Yeah, like, there's no contention about it.
You're not getting in there. Like they're not pounding the table. The players aren't saying, we're not going to do this. You're not going to make us. It's people calling and saying, wait a minute. This is going to be a little bit challenging and difficult for us. Would it be better if we do this? So I think that's the thing that's got to be remembered, that everybody wants to play. They're just trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah,
oddly, that's what's kind of reassuring about some of these conversations that you have with people, because whenever I had conversations with a lot of people I'm conversing with now, it was in the middle of lockouts.
That's and I think people forget that. And so like when they call up and the players say, well, we don't like that. Like the league is not going, come on, be reasonable. They're saying, okay, all right, let's try something else. And they're looking at it and trying to decide. So,
they're subject to the individual municipalities and what they decide. Like, okay, if it's up to like Rick DeSantis in Florida or Greg Abbott in Texas, then Tampa Bay, Florida, and the Dallas Stars are going to be able to play. But if it's up to Andrew Cuomo, who just shut New York schools off for the rest of the school year, or Whitmer in Michigan, they're not playing. And that's why, playing in neutral sites where I think it would be easier to pick and choose places where you can play is preferable to going and playing in 31 individual arenas, because you're subject to what's going on in that particular city at that particular time. And that's really in flux right now.
Go ahead. Let me just ask this question. And I have no idea. Maybe they just wouldn't do it because it wouldn't be a proper way to do business. But I mean, can the governors really stop the teams from playing without fans in their own, in arenas? I guess if they own the arena,
a lot of the arenas.
It depends who owns the arena. If they own a piece of it, they can.
Right, like in Toronto, the mayor of the city of Toronto shut down all public events until June the 30th. But 5 minutes after he released that, this was a month ago, it came out that Scotiabank Arena is privately owned by MLS&E, and they have no ability to stop them.
And here's the other thing about that.
I think it could be political suicide for the governors. Yeah, right.
Well, here's something that can come up. So if you're going to do it at these arenas and you're adding travel now to your schedule, as we saw, like there was a Walmart in Worcester that had 23 people that tested positive, right? If that were to happen, let's say in the greater Boston area, and I don't know, one of the teams was getting ready to come into Boston and they all of a sudden shut down the airport. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a big problem, because now you can't get into Boston. You got to hope that you can go back to where you were. And now that part of the schedule is going to get annexed off until things get secured again in Boston. That's sort of the problem with that whole plan.
I have a bunch of quotes, and I think let me get some of these out, because I think that'll help guide our discussion here a little bit further, because it does tie into what you just said there, Russ. So I asked if the regular season was to resume in July in arenas. Is it not completely impossible that we could see fans socially distance in arenas by the end of the playoffs, say October, November? And I just because that's what Brooks was implying, that there could be maybe some gatherings in some places, right?
Right.
So this next answer really, the way I wrote it down per word, it took me. I wanted to make sure I got this exact, because it really does show where everybody's head's at. Okay. And how confusing this situation is. I suppose it is in some places, maybe like Edmonton or Florida. Some states are already beginning the reopening now, after all. But I don't think you will see fans at games in places like Boston, Philly, or Toronto, or maybe you will. If the places opening up now indeed turn out to be opening up way too soon and see a relapse, it could be the Phillies and Bostons that do it right and are more safe in October and November. But then again, if a group of players from Philly are traveling to a new hotspot, say like Florida, and returning to Philly infected, then what? So that's like...
Go ahead with more quotes, but
but that really shows the way that.
To be honest, you and I talk to different people, but I haven't really run across, either from players or management or anything, anybody talking about playing in front of fans before next season.
Right.
If that, like
Larry Brooks in his article said something about that. That's why I was curious.
Yeah, I mean. I guess anything is possible. That's true.
The thing is, okay, if like they opened up the beaches today, or on May 8th, they're opening up the beaches in the Jersey.
That's a little bit different.
Oh, it is very different. But I think that but the more things are opening up now, and we're only in the beginning of May, the thought is we're October or November. How are we to know? How are we to know?
no, and that is accurate. We don't know, but I don't think anybody's thinking in those terms when they're talking about this. For mostly, I think they're, figuring out. Let's hope we can have fans next year. So
right. Well, so then finally, this last quote, which I want to give you guys, and then I have others, but I can throw them in as discussion goes on. But this, I think, also helps. And this. So I talked to one of the guys who I think is one of the smarter guys in this sport. Like this is one of the guys I really trust. And he's one of those guys who, not just I trust him, but he's just intelligent and very good at working out scenarios. And he's one of the guys the league goes to sometimes to help work out tricky wickets type stuff,
Yeah.
So he says, I said, where do you see this? Where do you see this headed? And he said, well, here's the thing. If the players are not okay being sequestered for 3 months required to complete the remainder of the season in the playoffs, that's okay. We all get that. But we can shorten that. The thing is, we can shorten that. The doctors will likely come back and say the 4-city quarantine, that's almost a must. I don't see any way they don't come back with that. But we can skip the regular season. We really can. I think we really can. We can go to the 24 playoff concept, which we talked about yesterday. Shorten the first rounds to best of fives, have a best of 7 conference and cup final, maybe even, and be done the 2019-20 season in about 6 weeks. If we started on July 1st, we could be clear by August 15th. That would get us out before the predicted fall relapse, hold a draft, UFA period, give us time for all that, and allow us to start in November, December, if all is well, with fans maybe even in December. So that was the scenario this guy threw out, and what he was basically saying is, even though this scenario is just something that the players are upset with or whatever, this could be, and I'm not saying it's a negotiation tactic, but it's a tactic it is sort of taking it towards an end, saying, okay, the players are maybe this concept of us at the NHL wanting an entire regular season and the playoffs is just completely unrealistic.
Well, we know the reason why they want to play the rest of the regular season. It's revenue, pure and simple.
Right, but they're not. We're talking about there is a obviously revenue, but what can you do here? We've all talked about that, but
they should be. This owner, I think, has it wrong in the sense that the NBA now, when they're talking about starting up their second season, they're starting to talk it up at Christmas. Christmas would get them through the winter portion of the fallback. It's not a fallback one. They're saying it will happen in December like it happened last time. So the fall is fine. It's actually when it hits like December when they're expected it. And see, the NBA is preparing for that.
Right.
The NHL would not be preparing for that under this scenario.
No,
but it's possible that if we were to finish by say August 15th, we could start in October.
Yeah, but they don't seem.
But then you're almost definitely going to have a stoppage some point.
You might have a stoppage, but it's better to get some games under. Like, are we living in a world where if we can get games done, we get games done, and then
right? But what a lot of the people in the NHL have been saying is we don't want to start next season unless we have people in the stands, and they don't think
that is definitely the case. That is October, January.
Well, they would like that, but they're not. You can't count on that. You just cannot. So
right. So I think that. But I do think the idea of this whole like quarantine for 3 months thing can be shortened in half, basically saying, pretty easily.
Well,
no, that's the wrong word, Ak. Not easily.
Not easily, but
it's more dangerous to do it the other way. I mean, that's logic just tells you that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it because maybe it's not that more. But if you're living at home trying to play games, then that's much more likely that somebody will test positive than if you're in a quarantine environment. So
what they're saying to the NHL players in this scenario, like what has happened right where they are right after the players throw out this thing that we're not comfortable being sequestered for that period of time, is they're saying, okay, we get that. Let's play out the scenario, but we got to talk to the doctors and stuff like that. And what this guy is saying is he can't see the doctors coming back with any other way but the sequester thing. And too long, let's shorten that.
I mean, you can do that. Like I don't think it's unrealistic that they wouldn't do that. I think that's plausible. I'm just saying it's just a little bit it makes me more nervous than the other way, and the other way made me nervous. So
Kevin, I wanted to get
the way I'm talking about is that I'm not talking about players living at home, Kevin. I'm talking about players living in a hotel for 6 months.
Well, yeah, even that, but I'm just saying that makes me nervous too. And if you did it the other way, that would make me more nervous. But is it possible it will work? Well, maybe. Really, you're kind of rolling the dice no matter what you do by trying to resume the season. So it's just how much risk you're willing to take and how much will the players be willing to put up with in order to do it? And it's I mean that to be honest with you, the simplest way to move forward would be just to say, we're not going to play this season. We'll start fresh in December. And, that would be clean. Like, nobody's going to test positive. The NHL is going to move forward. They can plan for a grand opening. They can do it all. But that's not really what they want to do. What they want to.
Well, there's one more scenario. So I heard yesterday, one of the doctors somewhere said, hey, it is possible by January there could be a few million vaccines ready based on these few positive things that are happening with a couple of the testing things. If the league gets a hold of that, why in the world would you not wait until starting January at that point? And they might know in 2 months that this is going to happen. To me, the safest thing is wait till everybody's vaccinated, then you can have fans.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, let me just ask you about this because it came out a couple days ago, and I sort of wrote about this yesterday, and I'm very skeptical. And I know that right now everybody's just throwing things at the wall, see what sticks. Mark Spector reported about this 24-team playoff format with everything. It was based on 4 neutral sites with the divisions all in one place, and it would be the 3 through 6 teams playing in a best of 3. But which it's inherently unfair. But we're in a war where we would have to do that. But what I was a little scratching my head at was the first and second place teams would play in a best of 3 to determine the division winner. You're talking about playing in a neutral site where home ice advantage and being the division winner mean absolutely nothing. So why would Boston and Tampa Bay not put out Providence and Syracuse? For those 3 games, for risk of players getting hurt, there's no consequence to those games. Why would they even play them?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that concept, just play 1 through 6,
right,
and settle a division, and then send 1 and 2 into the real tournament that begins when we're down to 8 teams. But look, I've said this all along. Whatever we will do is going to be great. And it'll be different, and we all just have to accept it. But if you did, and I threw this out right away, and PK Subban said essentially the same thing. If you played a NCAA tournament 1 to 31, number 1 gets a bye in the first round, and played it off just like single elimination, it will be one of the most memorable playoffs we've ever had.
Sure,
and it will have the highest ratings ever. Now, will people say, well, it wasn't a true Stanley Cup? Sure, people will say that, but it'll be remembered, and it'll be okay because everyone said, well, we had to do it because it was the pandemic. But there's, be less people in hotels. It'll bring the NHL to the forefront. So, my point in bringing that up is not that we should necessarily do that, but whatever we do, if we can play any level of hockey, it'll be good. People will like it, and we'll just have to figure out how to do it without, putting people in harm's way and hoping we can do it. And I like the fact there's been a lot of give and take, and by the time they end up making the decision, they'll have looked at everything because every day we have a different scenario. So I think that's a good thing. And
one of my sources actually said that is still on the that is actually still on the table. That and like you say, but they see it before they throw away the season. They have their if this then this, then this then this.
Yeah, no, that's not ideal in terms of you'd like a little bit more test. I mean, you could do the final series and best of 7 or 5 if you want to get there. But I mean, it would be just a great tournament, and everybody would get it, and it would keep teams wouldn't have to sequester all that long.
Right.
If they did that, and everybody's in, it'd be fun.
It would be 3 weeks. Honestly, that's what.
Yeah. Well, and it'd be the Detroit Red Wings, and look, the LA Kings were playing some decent hockey when they so could the LA Kings win a couple of rounds and look, they people say, well, it's not the grueling test, but you got to win 5 single games where
it would be fantastic.
A lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure on teams. So I mean, it would be an interesting test if they did that, and not everybody would be have to be sequestered very long, and you wouldn't put so many people at risk, and and those games, and I've said this and I believe this, those will be among the most watched hockey games in NHL history.
Now, I totally agree. That would be absolutely fantastic. And I think that I can see it. It does. I don't think it would take a lot of some kind of I don't know, say some place in Georgia now or whatever it has a big back fall or whatever because they open too early. It wouldn't take a lot of that for the NHL to probably say let's just do that. I think that in my mind that's knowing don't you think that's true, Kevin, that something like that would cause that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think everybody is. I can't remember the word you used, but I thought it was the right one. I think everyone's just perplexed about what to do, and I think everyone's trying to do the right thing. But this is devastating for the economics of professional sports.
Right.
This is going to disrupt the NHL economically for 2 seasons in all sports, because the revenue from this season has been disrupted, and the revenue from next season. We're taking into account the possibility we may not have fans at the start of next season, but more importantly, we're going to have a lot of companies that are normally big sponsors that simply won't have the money. We're going to have a lot of season ticket holders who've been out of work that aren't going to be able to pay. We're going to have a lot of people who are going to watch their nickels. We're going to have a lot of people who are afraid to go to the arena. So this is a major thing for them, and I think that's why they're trying to be, they're trying to be smart fiscally, the best way they can. They're trying to be safe. They're trying to figure it all out, and there's no right answer, and that's the problem. You can't build to one consensus because you're not sure whether that consensus is the right thing to do because we've never seen this before.
No, exactly.
Well, to that point, to the financial situation, Elliot Friedman reported yesterday that owners are pushing back vehemently against any kind of compliance buyouts based on what the cap might be next year, because essentially it's not wiping any money off their books, it's just clearing cap space. Then we know that Kurt Overhart made some sort of overture regarding a luxury tax. We don't know whether that's going to float or not, Kev, when it comes to a new CBA. But there has to be some sort of out of the box thinking here, because there are teams, if they even keep a flat cap next year, that are screwed, that won't be able to. I'm not saying they won't be able to field a team, but they were either expecting the cap to go up slightly, or they would have to make moves. And if there are no compliance buyouts, they don't have enough space to be able to fit their roster.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I would say to that is Donald Fear, and it's not the bad old days when the PA and the NHL couldn't get in the same room and be civil to one another. Donald Fear and Gary Bettman have been around the block a few times. They both know what's at stake here, and some accommodations are going to be made. Now, I can't tell you what it is, and these guys, I'm sure there are a bunch of lawyers who are thinking about this thing now. There'll be some accommodations to make it work. Now, who knows what it'll be, but it doesn't have to be compliance with buyouts.
No,
right. I got to ask this. Has any reporter yet asked any owner or the commissioner why they've never bought pandemic insurance? Because as an example, Wimbledon's is finally paying off. They've been doing it for 17 years.
Really?
It cost them like $47 million, and they're going to get a $141 million payout to cover their tournament this year. And it does make you wonder.
Can you imagine the premiums on that, Russ? The premiums on that would be.
So what? Wimbledon paid it?
How much have they put into that over 17 years, I wonder?
It was like $2 million and change a year.
So it would be much more for the NHL.
Sure it would. But I mean,
yeah. You're talking about a $2 billion, $3 billion league.
Yeah, right? I mean, think about what the cost would have been on that. I mean, haven't we read that, or it's been reported that to guarantee Ovechkin's contract so he can play in the World Championships is like $1 million. What would it be to get pandemic insurance for a league with a $5 billion revenue?
Well, maybe if every team does it, it's not as expensive. I don't know, but I'm just saying.
I think that's fair criticism if if you looked into it and it showed, but I'm sure it's not.
I'm sure it's a high number. Yes.
Yeah. So.
But the one of the options, and apparently this is a buzzword when it comes to the players and the Players Association and the owners. But one of the possibilities was a rollback. Was the fact that just were like they did after the lockout, rolling back the salaries percentage-wise to fit whatever the cap is. So if Austin or John Tavares is making $11 million and they roll back the salaries by 11%, then he's making $10 million instead of 11.
Well, that could come about simply in terms of once they sort of figure out if they can make any guess of what the revenue is going to be.
Right.
Because players don't want to get in a position where, they hate escrow the way it is now. Can you imagine what it could be if Gary Bettman and Bill Daly have meetings with every corporate sponsors and they figure that corporate sponsorship is going to be down, say 50%. Now, I got no idea, but let's just throw that out there. Well, if they went to Donald Fear and said, look, this is what's going to happen to us. This is what we're being reported now. Well, the players are going to want to get ahead of that. So they're not, having that so much escrow taken out. So they may elect to, okay, we will do that. We will take less money because we know what the salaries. Now, I bet there'll be some provision and it said that if the estimates are wrong, it could go the other way where the league would have to give them money if they're wrong about the estimates on how much down they're down. So, I like all this stuff, and I keep cautioning everyone to, don't sort of put this in the league versus players thing. I don't think it's like that this time. I think
I don't think so either.
Really not.
I think, and yet I do see sort of that, when you see the fans sort of talking about it, they're thinking in those terms, like, this is just the greedy owners or players being reasonable. And that's just really not the case. I think this is both sides really trying to figure out in a situation that's never been seen before, what to do.
So there's no question that they're working together really well, and there's no question that NHL fans have every right.
Here's my hope. I hope they err on the side of caution with regard to the pandemic, and I really do. I hope the players, feel that way too. That we're not just sort of protecting their lifestyles; they're protecting everybody's lifestyles, and that's been a problem here. Obviously, you can just tell by the protests that we've had in states where not everybody looks at this pandemic the same. Some people say, hey, I'll just leave it alone and let me decide what sort of precautions to take.
Well, to that point, Kev, you wrote just in the last day or so for Hockey Buzz on the extra precautions regarding coaches or general managers or even announcers who are senior citizens, and that has to be a concern for them if they do play games. Yeah,
and my reason for doing that is I just want to know whether or not it's been thought about yet, because it's something that we don't think about. We mostly think in terms of player safety, but the people who are at risk, and the CDC, if you go to their website, reports that 8 out of 10 people who are dying of this are 65 and older. Well, guess what? We have a handful of general managers and even a coach, Rick Bowness, who are in that category. Now, there are, good health mitigates that, and obviously if you have underlying conditions as well. So, it's not as strict if you're in a danger zone if you're over 65, but I think you got to be careful of that. And the other thing, and I do know this has been talked about with the teams, is a lot of broadcasters are older. So now, do we want to bring them, in the arenas and do that, or do we want to try to do something, broadcasting from studios? We've seen that in World Junior coverage. Yeah. And I sent an email off to Bill Daly, and he responded to me, and he said, basically, I think people have read my story. They saw his quote, which said, we haven't addressed whether or not we would have any, we would, prohibit, he didn't phrase it like this, but I'm paraphrasing that, we haven't even considered whether we might tell, people at that age to stay home, but we're going to vet all of that once we decide what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And if I had to guess what'll happen is the NHL will recommend that older people, stay away, and then team physicians will weigh in as well, and that will be the recommendation. Yeah. And maybe some GMs will just say, "Look, I'll just stay home," because they also don't want your team worrying about you as well. But I'm guessing Rick Boness is going to be behind the bench. And I think, other people, other GMs are going to just say, I'm in good health. I'm going to do it. So,
right.
But I think those are the kind of things, when you start talking about how complicated it is, those are the kind of things you got to look at. I mean, it's not as simple as saying, how do we figure out a way to start and protect the players? Then, you got to protect everybody.
We really do. I think we should have some fun with something here. Because
can I just, because there is a fun aspect to this. I think it's pretty humorous, but they brought it up on TSN a couple days ago, and it is something that has to be concerning. The fact that, okay, you're gonna have games with no fans. You're gonna have games where if they play in arenas, they're gonna be the microphones that pick up the slap shot being shot or the puck going off the boards or somebody being checked. And with no background noise to cover it up, what players say on the bench and what players say to each other on the ice will be fully be able to be heard. And are they going to have these games on 7-second delay because players are going to be dropping bombs and saying things to each other that are not that they could get fined by the FCC? I mean, it's way down on the list of concerns, but that there is a concern about that.
Well, I can tell you, as someone that saw games at Maple Leaf Garden in the 1970s, that this was pre all the audio that we now get at every game. Like they were trying to entertain us every second we were in the arena, and they didn't have music piped in, and you could hear every player on the ice, no matter where you were sitting. The guys, you would hear them calling for a pass or calling a guy, a special name. You would hear all that kind of stuff, and that was just part and parcel. And people were just accustomed to it. And
I like it. I mean,
it'd be colorful.
And I think that to me, I say, so what? Do it. It'll be. We always talk about wanting to, get fans inside the ropes, so to speak. And this is an opportunity. It won't last very long. And we'll get that, and we put a warning out beforehand, and start the games after 8:00, and hope for the best.
All right,
you could delay it, and you could delay it by like a few seconds.
7 seconds.
Sure, in case there's something really ridiculous. And to be honest,
and also what else that does, Kevin, if you delay it by 7 seconds, you actually give the Mike Emmerichs of the world who are in a Hilton somewhere, not actually at the game. That gives them a better shot at calling the game too.
If that's the way we have to do it. And I guarantee you that players are all going to be aware of this, and some of them will censure themselves.
Some of them will go the opposite direction too, though.
Let me
ask you this. We just have some breaking news. Governor DeSantis in Florida thinks that by June or July, you could have some fans in places. Now, he's mainly talking about the outdoor sports. He's talking about baseball and other things because, again, he's going with the heat factor, which isn't real. But if you get I mean, he is. I mean, there's no question.
I like that. I like your added element.
That's true.
It's based on Wolverine. But what I want to know is if a couple of governors go on board with this and talk about having fans, is this going to muddy up the works? Because then all those owners are going to be like, well, we can have fans in ours. Why are we going to go empty like everybody else?
It's going to be pick and choose your venue. That's what I was saying. It's like if you play in each individual market, if you play in 31 different buildings, it's gonna mean something. Who's the governor and what restrictions they're having?
My basic point is maybe the people in Florida are going to say use our venue because we could at least have 25% occupancy for every game.
Maybe.
That's my point.
And are they really going to be able to police that? Where it's
you're just throwing it out there.
No, but I mean, I've heard people say, well, we'll be able to put people in, and like they're going to do in restaurants, and we've already seen that in Georgia where they put black tablecloths on the tables you can't sit at and white tablecloths where you can. So are we going to do that in arenas where we're going to just put seats and then there'll be a black thing over the seats where nobody can sit at? Is that
yes.
They do that in Jacksonville already for NFL games.
And that's what they're going to do.
Well, do we think people will abide by that?
That's a great question. It depends if you're selling alcohol or not.
It depends if those people are the people in Lansing carrying M16s.
Yeah.
Well, this is a complication that goes well beyond sports. Like I was talking with my neighbor. We were, both 8 feet apart. We were yelling at each other, essentially. But he was talking about the airline plan of they're not going to sell middle seats to any people who are singles. So you'll have a middle seat if you don't know each other, but a family could buy a whole row. And are we going to have that option with
just another example of this virus playing into my already desires? Like, this is just another, like, the the introvert in myself. I love that concept right there.
Yeah, but
here's the other thing too, and that my neighbor and I yelled back and forth to each other. If you're going to the movies now, because in a lot of the places now it's assigned seats, obviously, you can just buy 3 seats. If you go to a matinee early, it's still only if you bought 3 seats, it's still only $15, at least in Michigan. If you go, New York, it'll be different, but where we are, if you go in an early show, it's $5 a seat. So
not by us. No,
you sit, and if you can buy 3 seats and make sure you got your distance from people.
Yeah.
And for $15, you still see a movie, which is probably less than what you'd pay in New York to see the same movie.
Well, for one ticket.
Have we heard anything more from your context, or Kevin, from your context, regarding the draft? Because Friedman said that, again, the pushback from teams has been ridiculous but it doesn't seem like that the chances are anything more than 50-50 that's going to happen in June or could happen after the season. What have either one of you?
I thought it was noteworthy that Steve Yzerman, who is one of the more respected guys in the game, came out publicly on Fox television and said, I think the word he used is ridiculous. I may be wrong on that. I shouldn't put words in Steve's mouth, but he certainly implied that trying to hold a draft before the season is concluded, he thought there were no benefits to doing that that he could see in a lot of issues, and he said that on a television interview, and I thought it was telling that he was willing to do that in such a public forum. So I don't know what's going to happen. I know from talking to a lot of different people that the GMs are definitely opposed to this, and a lot of team people are as well. So
yeah, same. I haven't heard anything new. I mean, I haven't heard like that. They were suddenly the other day. People were saying, now it definitely looks like it won't happen. I've heard like so many things. It's going to happen in June. Now it's not going to happen in June. There's no way it could happen in June. It has.
Yeah, that's all fluid. Hey, Eck, we should talk about the list of agents that the KHL came out with that basically said are no longer allowed to practice in Russia. And one of them is Dan Milstein, who hires the most Russians when they come over to get NHL contracts. They basically put out a list with like 6 agents.
Yeah, Mark Gandler was one of the other ones. He was really, he's still active, but he was really big, I'd say, years ago in terms of being the go-to guy for Russian players.
So this is their way of trying to corral it and say, we're going to make it harder for you guys to leave, basically.
I think that's what it's about. And the KHL is definitely in self-preservation mode, especially right now. With what they've lost the money, they had to cancel the rest of their season.
Yeah,
I know you did a podcast earlier this week with was Jillian Kemmerer.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. She is a very insightful, informative person.
Yeah, we've had her on. She's good.
Yeah, really an expert on the KHL. And she said some things that were really interesting. If you follow geopolitics, that China and Russia have been working on some economic deals. Mao Zedong was probably turning over in his grave because he said they would never see eye to eye for 10,000 years, and the Russian leader at the time said, "Oh, that's ridiculous." He says, "Okay, 9,999 years," but they are working on things, and she said we may see more of that with the KHL. That there's been some discussions about that. The China is sincere about trying to create a hockey presence in their country, and she could see the KHL sort of moving in that direction. She also said that a lot of the speculation, I think Wayne Gretzky even said it recently, about Ovechkin heading back to the KHL post NHL So we're talking about in his, probably early 40s.
Yeah.
It seems likely, given his popularity and considering that, someone like Datsuk and Yashin have both done that in the past. And she just said it would be such a boon for the KHL to have them on. And she talked about the Russian goalie, Yaroslav Askarov, as well. And he's under contract. He is the hot prospect goalie. Russ knows more about him than I do, but if you love Vasilevsky, not that they're similar, but some scouts think he could have a Vasilevsky type impact.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah. So anyway, she said he's under contract for a couple of years, and the thought is he wants to stay over there for a couple of seasons, and then come over here and get his feet wet in the maybe in the minor leagues, and then have jump to the NHL. So
it's more of a Samsonov type of situation.
Yeah. She pointed out. I mean, obviously the Ranger goalie. Yeah, he sort of followed that model, and it worked pretty well for him. But anyway, she was terrific, and we're going to have her on again on HockeyDebates.com podcast. And she really has. Some people kind of know the league, and then there are people who know what's going inside the league, and she's the latter. She knows, all the movers and shakers, and she's got real insight on what's happening over there.
That's great. That's really great. I want to have a little bit of fun just what the last couple of seconds of the show today, because when you mentioned this this field of 32 tournament type thing that you were talking about, Kevin, which I completely love. I mean, obviously we'd love it. It would be historic. It would be, I don't think it would really, people would have a hard time with it, because we would, like you said, it would just be acceptable that that's what we did during the virus. But then I just wanted to see what some of the matchups would be just for fun, and I was just going through and basically if you were going on winning percentage, and then if you had a tie, I went to regulation wins, and I ran that through my little thing here. And immediately I'm sold, because Boston gets the bye, right? Boston's the top team, right? Right off the bat. But who the second team is and the last team is? Be Colorado versus Detroit. How about that?
Yeah.
Starts right off with something that's kind of fun, that's right off the bat, you get
that's
that. Then after that you get Tampa versus Ottawa. Then St. Louis versus Montreal. And I mean, I just love this kind of stuff. I think you get some really fascinating things. Washington would play Anaheim. And the Flyers are next. They would play LA. So the Flyers would play the Kings. Like you're talking about the hot LA Kings. They would play. Let
me just pause for 1 second there, just because I want to bring up a point. This is an important one. You got to reseed after every round, so that there's still benefit for having been a good team throughout the regular season.
Otherwise, the regular season's meaningless.
Right. So we can't bracket it. We can't bracket it. We have to reseed after every round, so that the Bruins would always, as long as they're alive, will play the theoretically weakest team.
You have to know. I mean, really. I mean, think about it.
You do.
No, but I think that, logistically, that changes everything so much. If you
it's enough of a travesty doing it this way as it is, Aki.
Well, in the NBA, in college basketball, the team that goes undefeated, it doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter.
We see that in world championships often, and I think it's always irritating. When someone just being in the right spot gets to take advantage of an upset that happened, before, and it's not always the top team that's in that position. So I would reseed so that you can at least pay homage to the regular season.
You have to make the regular season worth something.
It is worth something off the top here. I mean, it's definitely.
But that's not enough.
No.
That's it's still. I mean, I disagree, because this is the reason.
You always disagree.
That's the reason I disagree. First of all, logistically, guys,
chaos.
Logistically, we don't have the right to do that right now. We're talking about a world where we've gone to this format. We're talking about a pandemic world where we have to go to this format in the first place. So how are we going to sit there and then further? Because what happens when you put them into their brackets and have the northeastern, the north, whatever, you'd have the brackets like you'd have in college basketball. You immediately can get the first bit of it done pretty quickly, and you can have fun with it, and you can have the quarantine safe, where you're not like mixing teams with quarantines and different teams. Everybody's in the same hotels. And then, and once you get past the beginning part of it, like the first round to me, okay, Boston, yeah, the benefit is playing Detroit. Like benefit for Boston is like Boston.
Boston would get the bye.
They shouldn't have to play at all.
Yeah, Boston.
Right, they're not going to play, but I'm going to say that. So Boston should play the winner of like, you know,
Boston will play the lowest. If
they should get the lowest, but they should get, you know, you got to work it out, because when you get in the middle of the NHL, you get a bunch of teams that are basically the same. Like, I mean, so to me,
I think that's true.
To me, does it really matter that we're moving these around? Like your difference between you're going to play Vancouver or Dallas?
Well, you don't know what Boston 2.0 is going to be like, though. Since the stoppage, they may have lost all their momentum. But the idea is, and because of that, they have to get reseeded to have some benefit from the regular season. Otherwise, what you're making is a coach's poll. You might as well just do a coach's poll.
Let me say this. I'll give Eklund points on this because I hadn't even considered that. What he's saying is, if you do it like a regional in basketball, then you can sequester players all in one spot, which makes them safer. So if that's the case, you know, if you can look at the logistics of that, then you can at least make an argument for that. I can see that. So
you could, Kevin, as opposed to college basketball, you could have it like, with there would be, you know, 8 teams in each, right? Yeah, 8 teams in each place, right? So you could have that be a 1 versus 8, where the top team would continually play the worst team that advances. So you could have that, as opposed to college basketball, where you have a definitive bracket.
Right.
You don't have that, but at least if you had in each place one, you know,
I would actually buy that, because what you're saying is you have the best of both worlds. You have the sequestered players. So everybody goes in one spot. Nobody's got to move. We're playing a regional there. But each time we play around, instead of just having the bracket, then we reseed within that little enclave of teams. Yeah. So that actually makes some sense.
So at that point, I mean, to me, that you know, if you're going to end up playing, it's going to be the point differences between most of the teams in the NHL is so freaking close. It doesn't really like. I mean, I think that what's going to end up
except for Detroit, who was 23 points behind the second.
Right. So the top team, Colorado, and you would put like the top team maybe there, and you put Boston in the bracket with maybe Detroit. Maybe Boston's like in that bracket with Detroit, but they're getting a bye in the first round or whatever. You have them, you know, you give them the advantage of that. But
here's the thing.
Yeah.
That, and I think this is. If you are going to argue that, not you personally, but if anyone argues that we want to do the draft because we want to create some excitement about it all, then you can certainly make the same case that you putting every team, including the lowly Red Wings,
it'll create excitement.
Will create incredible excitement to do that, and especially, and I think the league should be rooting for somebody, you know, like the Kings or the Red Wings.
But I'll tell you,
to win that first round.
So the Red Wings beat like 2 teams and advance a couple of rounds. Those owners will complain. They will.
But people get accepted from the beginning. Yeah, I mean, everyone's just got to say this is the best we could do.
I know.
And as somebody who embraces consistency, I'm against the June draft, and I'm against this. So,
well, then we might.
I mean, I actually understand that, and that's why I made a case right from the beginning that people got to leave aside their biases and accept the fact that this is a unprecedented pandemic, and you know, we can't have everything we want. Now saying that, I think you got to try within the framework of would work to be fair about it. So
I mean, this way, Mike, the Leafs may actually match up with a team they could beat in the first round.
That is probably true. I mean, I'll tell you who the Leafs will
What team is that?
I will find out for you.
Because I'll tell you something right now quickly. In that 24-team format, the Leafs would play the Sabres. Based on everything that in terms of the Leafs playing the Sabres, they'll lose to the Sabres.
But that would be fantastic. That would be a fantastic game. I mean, the Leafs playing the Sabres, the numbers for that would be unbelievable.
I think whatever we do,
Go Sabres.
I'm pretty reasonably confident that you will dislike it, Mike. And you know, because you don't like it the way we do it now, and plus, you're such a doomsday person about the Leafs. Like I remember last year when I tried to get you to admit that they could win 3 out of 10 times against the Bruins, and you just weren't buying it. So, hey, one other thing, because Mike brought up an interesting thing, and I wanted to bring this up because when I looked at it, it made me laugh because it's funny how memories. Mike brought up that we're approaching the anniversary of the Game 7 in the 1993.
It's today.
Is it today? I thought it was May 5th.
No, from everything I saw, it was today, March 1st. Or May 1st.
May 1st. Well, whatever it is. Okay. So anyway, I was at that game, and of course I remember Nikolai Borishevsky, and it was a shocking loss for the Red Wings. But my memory of that is that it was a significant upset. That's my memory of that, and that it was the Red Wings were going to win that series, and then I looked at it from a purely analytical perspective, and here's what I discovered because of my memories of how big that win was. The Red Wings were only 4 points better than the Maple Leafs. They won 47 games to 44 for the Maple Leafs. They had given up during the season 40 fewer goals than the Red Wings. Now the Red Wings had scored 70 more, but they had the number 1 goalie in the league that year in Felix Potvin, and the Red Wings were playing with Tim Shovelday. Now, despite the fact that back then it seemed like a really big upset, it's not that the Red Wings weren't favored; they probably were. But I'm just saying, time has now given me a different perspective on that. Maybe we should have anticipated that the Maple Leafs were going to give the Red Wings all kinds of trouble because of those factors. And there's been a lot of talk about that was Yzerman. He had 137 points that year. Well, Gilmore had 120 some.
Yeah, but Mike would have picked the Red Wings anyhow.
No, not that team, Russ, because they had the best record in the NHL after January 1st, and that was after they traded Fuhrer to Buffalo for Andrechuk. And Clark was healthy, and they were a veteran team with Pat Burns as a coach. I mean, they had all those pieces together, and not to say that that Detroit wasn't great because they were, but Kevin's right. Shovelday, Potvin, even though he was a rookie, out goaltended Shovelday.
I would end the show now with Mike showing some sort of positivity.
Yeah, okay. I like it.
Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Thank you, Kevin, so much for joining us, and we will see you all on Monday. Stay safe, everyone.